All right, Steve Roach here at ActionGrid with another overview of the ActionGrid product. This is November 24th. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. We're just going to blast through these slides real fast, mostly for the recording. Since everybody here wants to really see product. So we really, with ActionGrid, what we're trying to do is solve 2 or 3 big challenges. Challenges with list views, which you can read all here, and challenges with related lists, which are even worse than list views. And then lastly, to create a report-like experience for Salesforce without using reports, that is. So without further ado, let's just show some product, and we will have a question and answer session at the end. Do not hold your questions. Go ahead and ask your questions in the questions area of the GoToMeeting, and I'll try to get to those as we go. So first thing we see with an ActionGrid, is if I get my demo prepped here, is we see ActionGrid looks much different than the out-of-box Salesforce list view experience. First thing you notice is color and a more elegantly designed grid in general. So let's just focus here for 1 second on color. Why color? Well, we see so many spreadsheets out in the world that have color. Color drives attention to key data, to dirty data, to big data, and so forth. If I hover my mouse over this data right here, we can kind of see why somebody might put in a rule that says closing in the past is not possible, right? This is every CEO's nightmare, is sales reps that don't update their data. And so with ActionGrid, it's very simple to go into a grid. Our grids are always in edit mode if we so choose to leave them that way. And I'm just going to make a quick edit to this, and I'll move these all forward up by the month, since it's no longer October. And I'm going to use, I could do that one at a time, but I'm going to use ActionGrid to lasso my data. So when I lasso data, even that little subtle feature of ActionGrid is tremendous improvement. In fact, 700% improvement over checking boxes the Salesforce way. Now, what do I do when I have data selected to lasso that data and then do something with it is the actions side. So we're going to be jumping all over the place in this demonstration, but suffice it to say, there's awesomeness in the grid itself, color and a better grid experience and so forth, but it's all about taking action on that data. One of the actions I'm going to do is I'm going to take that date and I'm going to use a feature like a mass update. In fact, ActionGrid has 3 different mass update functions because Excel does. You know, you could copy and paste rows, you could fill down, or you can find and replace, right? So we have similar kind of features. We're going to use this fill down, and what that's going to do is that's going to copy that row of data down through all of the other rows. Let me unlasso that to see that in place. And you'll see that the data got updated. Now, you'll notice it's still yellow. The rule, the conditional formatting rule, is still being invoked because the data has not yet been saved, as indicated by this little red caret. What that means is, though, that we can revert our change. So if we don't like that, you know, we can undo the change and we could redo it if we want. Now, just to show off, I'm going to do a different style of mass update here. I'll select those same rows, and I'll do it with a mass update if I prefer, you know, the more traditional mass update. With this, it's going to show fields that are allowed to be updated on that grid. So this particular admin has allowed me to update a lot of fields, and I'm going to just update this date to the 30th, and then we'll say OK to that. And it's the same exact thing. It's just that style of mass update is going to immediately save the records and refresh that grid. By the way, that style of mass update can do 50 million rows of data. So if you do a select all and do a mass update and you've got, you know, a million records down here, it will actually mass update all of those and then send you an email with the results of that. So let's just focus here quickly on the other parts of the grid. such as how did we do that conditional formatting. So with conditional formatting, it's invoked here. You'll also see the formula column, which is a neat little feature, Excel-like, so to speak. So if we say conditional formatting, and all we need to do is make some new rule. If we make a rule that says, I'll just make these where it says Ryan, where if the owner of a deal is named Ryan, we're going to make this go purple. Maybe a nice contrast to that is white. We'll apply it to the entire row, bold, italic, whatever you want to do. This is a real nice, easy to use editor. And if you want, you can go to the advanced editor and do some really hard rules where you have all these functions to use and so forth. But we'll just keep it simple for today. And you'll see here my rule gets invoked. I've added color. I'm drawing attention to that data. The same thing goes with our formula editor. This, I'm going to paint a little vision for you here with this particular feature where you might use formulas in Excel to derive a column, to do something. Maybe I want to increase the prices of something and I want to see what that's going to look like ahead of time. So what I could do is just choose some field. You can either use these functions, but I don't think we have to use, a function to know how to do that. We'll just say times 1.2. So I would be adding 20% to the cost of that. Now we do need to give it a little help to tell it what format, because it doesn't know intuitively that it's a number or a currency or whatever. So we just highlight that and then put a little currency flag around that. So very easy to use the formula editor. Now I'll tell you where we're going with that. Where we're thinking about that is, yes, it's cool enough to have the actual formula, but really what people want to be able to do with this is use this to mass update. So what we're going to do is be able to add dates, for instance, add 30 days to something or add some price or do something. And then when we invoke this, we're going to have a right-click menu here where we say apply this column to some other column a la mass update. So some real power, because that's what really people are doing with their spreadsheets, why they dump it out to a spreadsheet so they can add columns and then copy and paste those columns. We're not exactly going to allow a copy paste into that column, but we're going to facilitate some kind of mass update with those formula columns. So let me clear my formatting because it's getting a little annoying here. And what we can do is we can still keep our view, but just clear our formatting so we can focus our attention on some of the other goodness that an ActionGrid can do. First off, you'll see here we have filters everywhere. These little column headers have filters, and we think that's very intuitive compared to the list view experience where you're having to type the names of fields and so forth and the values. Instead, why not offer your users, a simple checkbox interface? So really greatly lowering the bar to creating your own filters on your data. And then you just choose filter, obviously, and get your data. I will clear mine and put my one deals, take off my one deals again. Now, there's other styles of filters too. So when you have date fields, for instance, you'll see this little widget here, and that lets you type some of the common relative date operators, such as this month or this week or last. You can pull that list down if you like to see what all the operators are. But suffice it to say, we've got a lot of the operators there. So again, lowering the bar. Those operators are possible in list views, but you've got to go read them from some website to do it. So, you got to ask your admin, and who wants to do that? So the next thing that this grid can do is it's a report writer if you want. So we can do something like this where we take a column header and drag it into this area that says drag a column header and drop it here. So we just drop it in there and maybe even group it by a second field here, and now we've got a subgrouping. Now you'll notice with ActionGrid, if I just collapse these two groups here to show that, so we've got the first grouping here, Adam, and then within Adam's deals we've got the second grouping of close dates. So he's only got one in November, but he's got two in January, and you'll see that we've always got a subtotal going on. the grand total for Adam and the subtotal in between there. Now with ActionGrid, you can of course also use that other common feature of Excel, which is to select some rows like so, and you use a feature here called Summarize Column. So if you don't want to group it and it doesn't fit naturally into some kind of grouping, but you still want to see what the value is of those cells, it'll summarize any numeric column. So if you hover over that and choose those rows, you'll see we have 7 rows summing up to 18 grand and so forth. So that's the main pieces of the grid. This is a very short webinar, so we can't show all the features, but I do want to call your attention to the various access points of an action grid. So let me clear my grouping. You'll notice here we have this concept called the MultiTab. What that allows us to do is, again, change one of the big paradigms in Salesforce, which is the one object, one view paradigm, and you end up having lots of tabs across and maybe running into your tab limits. Here with an action grid as a multi-tab, we can break down those barriers. Instead of doing this kind of concept, although we do support that, it's the same as you would in a list view, why not consider exposing the same object but as tabs in different styles so that the data is more in your face, presenting itself to you. You're more likely to go to that particular view of data if it's staring there as a tab. You'll also notice that we can mix and match our tabs with other objects. So here we have 4 of the same object, but a different view, just different characteristics defined in those views. And then here we have different objects where we have, the leads in this case, and then over here we have tasks. Great action grid use case here for anyone who's importing email to Salesforce, using Salesforce IQ or LinkPoint 360 or something like that. If you're importing email, great, but there's no really easy way to read through that email. With an action grid's reading pane concept, you can easily do that by simply exposing the reading pane, looking at your long notes. We even support rich text fields in those long notes. So if you had some kind of a note field that's using Salesforce's rich text, you can see that you can get some really rich notes here, put bolds and italics and bulleted lists and so forth. Whatever Salesforce supports, we support. We're just exposing that forward into the grid so you can have a better user experience. Now, last thing, while showing those reading panes, you'll see that one of the characteristics of the reading pane is the concept of being able to show the related data, the many pieces of data underneath that. So in this case, we would have, maybe we are looking at a row of data here. So here we're looking at Bill Clinton. And if we were to see the many tasks underneath his record, they would display there. Or all of these grids are add in place, so we can simply add a task in place. We don't have to, open up a different screen to do that. Just put, whatever. We can even mark it completed right here, and then we'll have that task. A great use case of that is working opportunities. That same concept is working opportunities where you might have, in your reading pane, you might have something looking more like this, where you've got your opportunity products right here. Now we can see another use case of ActionGrid is this concept of the opportunity, or I should say the child column. That is allowing us to flatten the Salesforce database. So normally here on the New England Patriots, the natural way that this data is exposed is 3 rows of data like so. And if we were to add another row of data, and we'll put a Samsung on there, something like that. If we save that row, notice all of the default things will appear. All the triggers, all the validation rules will occur. So all that price and data and so forth. Now, as we refresh this grid, remember that New England Patriots row, we'll see that this concept of the child column is very novel to ActionGrid. What that allows us to do is flatten that out and put commas in between there. Now, that's both a visual cue. It helps you to see it. You can tell I guess, right here on the Minnesota Timberwolves and Packers that we have no products quoted. Not only is the color telling us that, but a big old hunk in white space tells us that there's nothing there for us. The other thing that it can do is it allows you to cross-object filter, which means that we can go down in and we can filter those rows and say, you know, find me only the opportunities that have an iPhone 5 quoted on them, for instance. Or what I think is more powerful, because nobody else has this, is the converse of that. Find me all opportunities that do not have an iPhone 5 quoted. So we have something like that. Now, one neat feature of ActionGrid is its batch add functionality. So everybody's got mass update, but nobody has batch add. So in these, 6 rows, these 6 rows that I've got selected, maybe this is a problem for me. I'm supposed to be quoting something with these opportunities. With our generic batch add, I'm just going to choose actions. I'm going to hover over this for a second because we can batch add anything, batch add some tasks to these particular opportunities, these selected 6 rows. In this case, I'm going to choose one of the out-of-box ones called Opportunity Products. And what that's going to do is prompt me for the product, and I'll say I'll add an iPhone 5 on there. Oops, iPhone 5. And let's sell 100 of those things, just to get a big number in there. And I don't think it matters what we type in here, but we will. And what that's going to do is it's going to refresh the grid. It's going to ask me if I want to see them in a different grid, because maybe I want to do some mass updating to that data or whatever. I'll say no, just for the sake of time in this demo. And we'll just refresh our grid. And now those rows disappeared because they did have an iPhone 5. Remember, our query was does not exist. So if they did exist again, those rows would have all had an iPhone 5. Notice there's no yellow on my grid anymore because I've used the batch add. And you can use that batch add for anything, you know, batch adding of tasks, batch adding chatter to records and so forth to do that. So this webinar is the very short version. That's about almost all we have time for in this particular session. But I want to show the last bit, and then we'll leave it at that. So we typically show the last access point of ActionGrid is ActionGrid can add tremendous value when it's used as a related list. As a related list, we can see that we can replace all of the list views, the traditional list views, with action grids, and then we get over all those limitations such as the 10-column limit, the inability to add your own columns or sort columns or rearrange columns. You just really can't do anything with related lists. You know, here we've got related lists, and we've got all of the power of an action grid. You know, if we wanted to do something like something where we find and replace, you know, find all of the email addresses here and replace those, you know. So if I said find me Denver Broncos and replace those Broncos.com.xyz, I think is what it was, and replace those with get action grid, right? Just a typical sort of thing you do in an Excel sheet. And then maybe, you know, you want to save that, and then you want to do a batch email to those people. So we have batch email, batch clone, batch add. If you didn't get the message yet, lots of batch functionality. Batch email is a great one for driving revenue. Just an easier way for you to send an email to a bunch of people. Just choose some Salesforce template here, and, you know, choose a follow-up message. And then that's going to send out all those emails. If we were to look at my email queue, we'd see those going out. Those do go out through Salesforce proper. So we're right at our time allotment, and it's time for me to answer questions. All right, so the first question is, how hard is it to make one of these related lists? And I don't usually do this in the webinars, but I'll do it today. Very easy to make these. We have what's called a MultiTab wizard. We can both make them for the top level tabs like so, or we can make it for a related list. I'll do it for a related list because it'll demonstrate the same basic concept. And so what you do is you come to ActionGrid Setup, you just go to the object that is going to have the related list, so that you think about the form you're going to work on. And from here you just go New MultiTab, create some tab that you want. I'm going to make this one named Delete Me so that I remember to delete it after this. And it's just going to continue to prompt you for objects. So I might choose my contacts object like so. I usually create one of these views on the fly, or use an existing view, add another tab. And what we're doing is we're just building up those tabs. So now I'll add some opportunities on there and continue on, add another tab, maybe the tasks, continue on, add another tab, save and finish, and then what you'll have is a multi-tab visual force page. Now you still have to go to your page layout and actually add it onto your page, but that's as simple as just editing your layout and just dragging that visual force page onto your actual page. It'll appear as a visual force page that you can just drag into the area, just like any other visual force page. Second question, which is how, so somebody didn't like when I did the mass update. They were worried that too many fields got exposed there. So their question is, can you disable mass update completely, or can you just disable it for certain fields? And so here are the fields that are currently enabled, and that is also done in ActionGrid Setup. So what you do is you go to your object. You can, of course, disable it completely by going here to the object, or you can disable it globally. But here you'd go to your object, and then you'd find your mass update somewhere here in the list here, and then you just disable it. So everything in ActionGrid has an on-off switch, but this question was about disabling certain fields. And so what you do here is you just go to the fields that you want disabled, and then turn off those fields on a per profile basis. So in this case, we turn off the inline editing and turn off the mass update, and then we want to make sure that we did that on a particular profile. So we turn that off for everybody, or re-enable it on a certain profile. So maybe you allow the sysadmin. So in this case, you see why I had it is because the system administrator actually had it allowed, even though globally everybody else had it hidden. So if I turn it off for the sysadmin, then he won't have access to that either. And we just save that, and then the account field would no longer be mass updatable. I think that is an instant change. No, I guess I have to refresh my grid once before that gets invoked. Let's see. We have one more question. Can you set the column widths for the grids? In fact, the widths, the sort, and all of that are set. So whenever the grid is saved, so if I set this column width and I change this one here and make that a little bit wider or skinnier, whichever you like, those are saved as properties of the view. So when you save that view itself and say OK to that view, and then if you were to go to some other grid, just go there and then come back, you'll see that it will indeed retain the widths of all the columns. So the widths are indeed a property of the saved view. So now if I come back here to that same tab, it will have remembered my wider than usual stage field and the columns and the column order and so forth. Hopefully that answers that question. Can it work with custom objects? ActionGrid loves custom objects, no problem there. If you don't see a tab already for your object, you'll just be using your ActionGrid Explorer. This is the sort of default thing for administrators primarily until you get around to making yourself some tabs. you can always use this ActionGrid Explorer to navigate around through your custom objects. So, here we have some custom object named billing cash receipt, which is clearly not a native Salesforce table. And you'll see, it's never been used, so there's not too many fields there, but I just use my field chooser to add whatever fields are on there, or I use my child action grids to expose, child objects for that, which again get exposed through the reading pane. So just a quick demonstration of that. And that looks like all of the questions for today. We went about 5 minutes long. Last call for questions. Okay, then we'll call that a day for our ActionGrid webinar. Thanks, everybody. What we will show at the end here is how to contact us. We'll leave it with that, so you can just go and download that. There is a free trial, 15-day free trial of ActionGrid, and we offer free technical support and training to help you get started on the right foot. And that's it. So thanks, everybody, for attending. Have a nice day.